Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie. In this video, I'm going to be looking at the astrology and I Ching for today, which is Wednesday, October the 16th, 2024. I'm also going to look at some anniversaries and a birthday that we celebrate today. I mean, we might celebrate today. I mean, not all of them are great. But, we've got, for example, the anniversary of Project 596. In fact, it's the 60th anniversary of Project 596, and I will be talking about that. And it's also the birthday of, or it would be the birthday of former Albanian leader Enver Hoxha. Also, what else? We've got the anniversary of the first executions as a result of the Nuremberg trials. And if you're into religion and the Catholic Church, it is the anniversary of the white smoke on 1978, when the white smoke appeared to announce the fact that a pope had been elected, and that pope was John Paul II. So I thought I'd look at what was going on all those years ago in 1978 when John Paul II, the first non-Italian pope since the 16th century, was elected. And I think that might also be a good opportunity to look at his horoscope. Before I do that, though, I want to look at today, the astrology and the I Ching for this Wednesday. And just a reminder, if you enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it, and if you're not subscribed, I would be super grateful if you were to subscribe. So here we go. Let's look at what's happening today. As far as the pictures are concerned, there's the Pope John Paul II. There is Enver Hoxha. I don't know if I pronounced that right. And then we've got that's Project 596. Project 596 was the first Chinese nuclear blast when they successfully tested I think it was a 22 kiloton weapon. Interestingly, that took place a few days before Kamala Harris was born. So there's a linkage between Kamala Harris and China's first nuclear test. But so as far as what's happening today, in fact, there's not a great deal happening. We've got the moon in, where's the moon? Moon is in Aries. So, as always, if you've got the moon in Aries, it's about being perhaps more assertive than usual. The moon carries a great weight on its shoulders, you could say, because the moon is the only planet in fire signs. We've got nothing else in the fire sign, so all the energy, all the spark is carried on the moon's shoulders, and so we are perhaps trying to make things happen, and it's quite emotional though. We just feel something has to happen. We feel we want to assert ourselves, but sometimes it can be hard work. And just a reminder now, with the moon in Aries, we've got a build-up to a full moon. So that full moon is tomorrow. I know a lot of people are getting excited about this full moon. And this full moon, of course, it takes place a few days before Kamala Harris's birthday. Because her birthday, I think, is on the 20th. So over the weekend, we've got Kamala Harris's birthday. I will be looking at that full moon. But we can feel the impact of this full moon, even though it's not exact. Because, we've got the moon in Aries, opposition the sun in Libra. It sort of feels that something is reaching a peak. Something is about to manifest. Or perhaps that we're starting to understand something. So moon in Aries certainly wants to take the initiative, wants to make things happen. But at the same time, it's starting to make that opposition to the sun. We are aware that something else is starting to manifest, and whatever this something is, it may feel that in some respects it blocks us, or it gives us pause pause for thought. Now, the moon itself doesn't make any sort of huge aspects of note today, but we do have Venus trine Neptune. So there's Venus and there's Neptune. So Venus is sort of moving away from a trine of Neptune. So Venus trine Neptune, I mean, it's quite a pleasant aspect, I'd say. It can be sort of a bit pie in the sky. You know, I've got Venus trine Neptune. I've got Venus, you know, Venus in Cancer, trine Neptune in Scorpio. And I don't know, it can live in the clouds a bit. In my experience, in my personal experience of having Venus trine Neptune, a lot of time just lost in thought and maybe lost in fantasy and speculation, and time goes by, years go by, nothing's changed except I'm older. You know, that's, I suppose, how Venus trine Neptune might actually work. And so, as far as the aspect today is concerned, it's quite sensitive, it's quite spiritual. We can tune into things. I think many of us may find that our feelings are finely tuned and we have a good understanding of other people, or at least we think we have a good understanding of other people. We're certainly picking up signals. I suppose the question is, are we able to interpret those signals correctly? It doesn't matter how much information we have if we can't understand it. And perhaps with Venus trine Neptune, there may be a certain tendency to focus on the wrong things. And at the same time, we've got Mercury biquintile Neptune. So Mercury is making a 144-degree aspect to Neptune. That's biquintile is 2/5 of the circle. And it's kind of a bit similar to Venus trine Neptune. With Mercury biquintile Neptune, well, biquintile is somewhat of a contrived aspect. It's what we are deliberately trying to create. And I think many of us may feel with Mercury biquintile Neptune that we want more from our lives. Perhaps we want more in an inspirational sense, or perhaps a spiritual sense. You know, we're not comfortable with just this 3D material world in which we're living. We just want more, and we want to go beyond. And I think we might want to make a special effort to create connections with something that is beyond, which is beyond ourselves, looking for something meaningful. I suppose that may be one way of looking at it. Though on a sort of more mundane level, I suppose Mercury biquintile Neptune could be about someone sitting down and seriously working out how to tell a good lie. That could be how Mercury biquintile Neptune works, or seriously working out how to deceive, or how to spin a story. Anything to avoid the truth. That could be how Mercury biquintile Neptune works. But I don't want to be negative. It can be quite an inspirational aspect where we are aware that there are things beyond the material realm. Now, there isn't a great deal else going on. Well, the sun is actually on a fixed star, quite an important fixed star, and that is Spica. So Spica is one of the most important fixed stars in the book. It always comes up. So to give you an idea about what Spica is all about, let's look at what Robson says. So Robson says of Spica, he says it is a brilliant flushed white binary star in the wheat year of Virgo, and it gives success, renown, riches, a sweet disposition, a love of art and science, but unscrupulousness, unfruitfulness, and injustice to innocence. I'm not quite sure what that means. Now, in conjunct with Sun, Robson says that Spica would be Great and lasting preferment, eminent dignity, immense wealth, great happiness to natives, parents and children, help from friends among clergy, favourable for public and legal affairs, and it's, with Venus and Mars, the native can be a potent king, obeyed by many people, but subject to many infirmities. You get the picture. Speaker is quite a fortunate fixed star. Ebertin and Hoffman, in their fixed stars and their interpretation, they also talk about Speaker, and they say about Speaker, let's find Speaker here, is Speaker is, again, they're favourably inclined towards it. Honours and fame. Speaker is of marked good influence for scientists, writers, artists, painters, sculptors and musicians. It can give wealth and preferment even to people from humble origins. So overall, Speaker is a good influence, and perhaps somehow we can tune into that Speaker and sort of get an idea about what life is all about, and tune into our potential. So I know we've got this full moon coming up, but this full moon, I suppose the full moon is going to be quite close to Speaker. So maybe we can go above and beyond. Maybe there's an opportunity for preferment, or just artistic and cultural success, as suggested by Speaker. One other point I should make is, I was talking about Venus trine Neptune and Mercury biquintile Neptune, and this concept of sort of fantasy and being pie in the sky. And, we do not have any personal or social planets in Earth signs. We've only got Uranus and Pluto in Earth signs. And as a result, things could be not particularly grounded at the moment. There isn't much Earth around at the moment. It is a bit of a problem. Yeah, the moon will go into Taurus in a couple of days' time, but even with the other planets, we're waiting. When are planets which are now in Libra and Scorpio going to go into Capricorn? Not for a long time. So there is not much Earth around, and aside from the times when the moon moves into Earth signs, it doesn't stay in Earth signs for very long, there isn't much Earth on the horizon. And so with a day like this, with Venus trine Neptune, Mercury biquintile Neptune, that really does emphasize the point that some of us are in the sky and we're not very grounded, and we may dwell on fantasies and things which really have little hope of being realized. So do try to make a special effort to be grounded at this time. Not just about today. It's about in the weeks to come. Now, that chart was set for New York. Moon was at 12 degrees Aries. If we set that at noon, New York. If we set that chart for Sydney, Australia, at noon, the moon is at 3 degrees Aries. So in Australia and New Zealand, there may be a chance that at the beginning of the day the moon is in Pisces. Maybe there's at the beginning of the day, perhaps especially in New Zealand, there'll be a certain moon conjunct Neptune feel to the day. Perhaps a more emotional day, at least at the beginning of the day, but I wouldn't be overly concerned about it. By lunchtime, the moon is going to be in Aries, so I don't think that there is really a huge difference between what's going on in Australia and New Zealand and what's going on in the rest of the world or in the Americas. Turning to the heliocentric picture, and here we have the positions of the planets, where we put the Sun at the center of the solar system, where it should be, arguably, and there we have it, the Mars-Jupiter conjunction The heliocentric Mars-Jupiter conjunction, which we have been tracking for the last week or two, is now exact. And it might sound good, Mars-Jupiter conjunction. Jupiter is supposed to be a very fortunate planet, but Mars is high energy, so you put Mars and Jupiter together, and you certainly get a lot of action. But the question is that action necessarily going to be fortunate? I think with that Mars-Jupiter conjunction, there is some danger that we overdo it. Or maybe we don't overdo it, someone else overdoes it. And it might be about the inappropriate expression of power, or something big and energetic happening, which may not be entirely fortunate. So in terms of our own power, we must be careful how we use it. So whatever you're doing, don't put too much energy into anything. Just put enough energy into something so as to get a result. And if you put in more energy than is necessary, then, well, at best it's a waste of energy. At worst, it could be overkill and you could cause a lot of trouble. So we can't control what countries and governments do with Mars-Jupiter conjunction. I mean, in most cases we can't, but we can control what we can do in terms of our own sphere of influence, and just try to minimize things. Keep calm. Don't push it. You've probably got all the energy you need without exaggerating. Now, Mercury is at 28-26 Scorpio. So we've got Mercury trine Neptune at 28 Pisces. So we've got a heliocentric Mercury trine Neptune. And so in a way, that's more of the same. We've got Venus trine Neptune geocentrically. We've got Mercury biquintile Neptune also geocentrically. And then heliocentrically, Mercury trine Neptune. So that suggests to me a high level of sensitivity. And I suppose we can understand perhaps what is happening. Or at least we get a feeling of what is happening out there, not just in the world, but in the solar system, and we get a sense of where things are heading. We may not be able to make sense of this, though. We kind of have a feeling that we know where we're heading, where things are going, but we may not be able to verbalize it because it's Mercury trine Neptune, and there may be also a sense of excitement there because Mercury is actually making an opposition to Uranus as well. That opposition to Uranus is starting to fade, but still it is very much there. So perhaps in terms of our thoughts, with Mercury aspecting both Neptune and Uranus, we are picking up some stuff where we might not understand it, but we kind of know it's important. And in terms of us as beings with psychic abilities, if we have psychic abilities, maybe now's the time to practice them in a constructive way. Of course, we always have to be careful. If you're psychic, don't you not to be overwhelmed. And if we're not psychic, maybe we should try to be psychic. We mustn't be too dismissive. Things do happen. There are strange powers out there, and maybe we can tune into these powers. So, having looked at the heliocentric picture, I want to do the astrology for the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Wednesday, October the 16th, 2024. Aries. Aries, the moon is now in your sign, and it's not just in your sign, it's conjunct the North Node. And so, Aries, you do feel that in some respects your time has arrived, that you're not going to sit on the fence for any longer, and you're going to explain yourself to the wider world. And it's not just about explaining, it's about actually doing stuff. And I do think that action is going to be quite important to you. Now, you might still have your reservations. Mars, your ruler, is in Cancer, and so you might feel that you do have to take things slowly, not be in too much of a rush. You don't want to upset your fundamental stability, but it may just feel there isn't a choice. The Mars in Cancer is still square the Sun. It's still square Chiron. Now that Sun square Mars is, it's about 1 degree off, so it's separating. But I think it's still quite motivating, and you do feel that you have to respond. And if things aren't to your liking, you're not going to be able to keep your feelings and thoughts to yourself. Though maybe it's not about the words; it's about the actions, and action is going to really matter to you. And from a heliocentric perspective, Mars is making a conjunction to Jupiter, and that conjunction between Mars and Jupiter could actually be very motivating. It does give you the ability to make things happen. Now, it's like you've got this huge power at your disposal. It's sort of almost the power of the universe, and the question is, what do you do with it? I am confident that if you make the effort to try to make things happen, that you're going to get fast results which might actually exceed your expectations. Yet, you can have too much of a good thing. And if you go all out in a particular direction, which I don't think you're going to want to, not really. But if you find you are putting a lot of energy into something, then things could get out of control very quickly. So Aries, I think it's important that you think things through and you have an awareness of what you're doing. And in this sense, you may be helped by the fact that we've got this run up to the full moon. Now, that full moon is not exact today. It's a full moon is a feature of tomorrow, but I think you still might be picking up on it. So you've got the moon in Aries moving towards an opposition of the sun, and that sun may be a restraining influence on you. It may give you an idea about what is possible and what is not possible. And so perhaps what you have to do is balance thought and action, and balance what you want to do with, for example, your understanding of the social environment. Because I think you do actually have a good understanding of the social environment and how it might be limiting you. Now, we don't want you to be limited. We don't want you to feel frustrated. It's just important that you make the most of whatever you've got. But sometimes it's a good idea to understand the limitations that you are being placed under, and to get a perspective. And I think getting a perspective could actually be very important today. Sometimes action is required, that is true, but try to think about where you are in the grand scheme of things. So if you can get a sort of a bird's eye view, something that appears to be really, really important, something really bothering you, you might be able to get a new perspective and start to understand that it is actually quite minor. But not everything is minor. The moon is conjunct the North Node in Aries. At some level, something needs to be done. And I suppose you have to also consider, if you could consider your motivations. If you see something and you feel you need to respond to it, ask yourself what is at stake. If you don't respond, what is going to happen? Is someone going to be hurt, for example? I mean, this might be a case when you feel that you might have to, at some level, intervene, because Mars is square Chiron. Okay, that Chiron is not exact, but it's still square Chiron. And with Mars square Chiron, it's not just about you trying to be different, you trying to be the maverick. It might be you feeling that something is wrong, someone is hurting and that you have to actually do something about it. And in that case, there would be a sense of moral obligation. And if you do feel a sense of moral obligation, well, you don't want to be overwhelmed by moral obligation. Sometimes you can't help, but you have to do whatever you can. So overall, Aries, it's quite an action-packed day, but you do have to get the balance right, and you don't want to be excessive. I think there's a danger that you go too far in one direction. There's a danger that you go too far in one direction. That is a possibility. There's also a danger, I suppose, with Mars moving into Cancer, that you just decide that you just don't want to be involved. It's just too much for you. I think that's not going to be a problem for most Arians, but it is possible. But likewise, you can't just shirk responsibility. You can't shirk your moral responsibility. So that is another dimension to what's happening today. Taurus. Taurus, you are kind of aware that there are things happening that you don't fully understand, but you're nonetheless aware that something is going on. You know, one of the main aspects today, indeed you could argue geocentrically, the main aspect today is Venus trine Neptune. So that's an important aspect for you. It says very much something about how you operate and who you are and what you're picking up on. And I think that today with Venus trine Neptune, Taurians are probably going to be fairly sensitive. You will be able to feel things, and you're going to perhaps be a little more subtle than usual. Now, in terms of subtlety, I would not have said actually that Taurus is always the most subtle of the 12 signs. Taurus can be unsubtle. Taurus is quite capable of saying things which are completely inappropriate, which totally misunderstand the general vibes. Taurus can be a real party stopper when they want to be sometimes, but not today. I think you are sensitive. You are able to tune into other people's sensibilities, and I think that Venus trine Neptune allows you, I think, to really behave correctly. And I think that if you just make a little bit of effort, you'll understand other people, you'll understand what people want, you'll understand where their limits are. And I think that from a sort of an intuitive and sort of even psychic sense, you'll have a good awareness of what people are thinking and feeling. Okay, you won't know the details. It's just a feeling. It's perhaps something that is going to be difficult to put into words. So if you get a feeling about something, take note of it. It's informing you. But that doesn't mean that you actually have to take action. That can possibly wait until you're feeling a little more grounded. And of course, one problem that Taurians are having, indeed probably all the earth signs are having perhaps, is the fact that there isn't much in the way of earth today. We've only got Uranus and Pluto in earth signs, Uranus in Taurus, Pluto in Capricorn, but we don't have any other planets in earth signs. So you may feel a little bit ungrounded. But, going back to that Venus trine Neptune, it is a reminder that although Taurus is an earth sign, it can be incredibly spiritual. It can really believe things and have faith in things and have faith in the earth. I mean, there is a connection between Taurans and the earth in a spiritual sense. And perhaps with this lack of earth signs at the moment, with Venus trine Neptune, you're very aware of the environment, and because you know that you don't have it. I mean, in a compensating kind of way. Perhaps you're aware of how not just you might be alienated from your natural environment, but how other people might be alienated, and that might be bothering you, and perhaps bothering you in a good sense. You realise that things aren't right, and it's always good when Taurans, perhaps, or not always good, it can be good if Taurans feel that things aren't right, because Taurus is a stubborn sign, and when it sees an injustice, it sees a problem, Taurus can really dig its heels in. So that is one aspect of what actually is happening today. Though I don't think that it's actually necessary for you to make a fuss or to tell people what's on your mind. It's not a time to preach. The preaching can come later, but not right now. I think that with the moon in Aries moving up, you've got the sort of the tension as it's building up to this full moon. Then I think that you kind of need to soak up the atmosphere, and get a sense of where actually things are going. The moon will move into Taurus in a day or two's time, and then we can have another look at the situation. Gemini, you, in some respects, are a bit detached. You just get a perspective, and you look at what's happening, and in one sense, you kind of feel that there's not much you can do, at least in the short term. And perhaps rather than be focusing on what's happening immediately around you, you might be sort of thinking about the world at large, history at large. Perhaps it's occurring to you that you are existing in one small part of the planet in one small micro period of history, and okay, that might make you feel a little bit small and insignificant. But if you look at it in one way, but on the other hand, it gives you a sense of the sort of enormity of the whole thing. And sometimes when you look at the enormity of the whole thing, it can be somewhat overwhelming. But Mercury is in Scorpio, and with Mercury in Scorpio, you're probably more intense than usual, and I think that there is sort of more action than usual taking place on a sort of inner level, and that might be connected with the fact that we have got a biquintile aspect between Mercury and Neptune. And this biquintile, 144 degrees, that's 2/5 of the circle. And that biquintile aspect is sort of encouraging you to look beyond things. You are thinking and you're feeling, and you are also imagining. And you are imagining what things could be like. And you know that it might not be immediately possible, but somehow in this swirl of imagination, Geminis have got a very active brain. In this swirl of imagination, 95% fantasy perhaps, but there is a 5% core there, which is real. So if you can strip away the fantasy, helped by the fact that you've got this Mercury biquintile Neptune, you might be able to really start to understand something and get a real sense of what might be possible. And, Mercury biquintile Neptune. Remember, we've got Mercury biquintile Neptune geocentrically, but heliocentrically, we have Mercury trine Neptune. So Mercury trine Neptune, that Neptune is there. You can't avoid Neptune today. And on the face of it, Geminis and Neptune perhaps have a somewhat uneasy relationship, but I would have said today Neptune is your friend, and Neptune can lead you in directions that you perhaps weren't expecting. You don't actually have to act on these directions. You don't have to take risks. You don't have to go into areas where you don't understand the rules. Neptune is kind of informing you, but it's perhaps informing you in a language that you are not immediately familiar with. I mean, sort of Geminis, obviously the language of Geminis is all about words, isn't it? But the language of Neptune is not just about words, it's about feelings and impressions. And so Gemini, do try to tune into these feelings and impressions. Just because you don't understand something, just because you can't verbalize something, doesn't mean that it's not important. And at the same time, Gemini, on a sort of a perhaps slightly more concrete level, don't ignore other people, don't ignore your friends, your associates. You can make some progress in this direction, and it might be a time where you're thinking about who the right people are. Because, we do have a build-up to a full moon. There's a full moon coming up, and that full moon may have some impact on your social life, and it may be an awareness that some people are not nurturing you as they should be, or perhaps they're not supportive of your creativity. But also there may be an awareness that some people can be very useful. And I think it may be the case actually that Geminis may need to be pushed, not today, but perhaps over the next couple of days, that you may realize that you need feedback, you need encouragement, and perhaps that feedback and encouragement can't come from you yourself. I suppose it could, but it's hard work. Maybe you need to be told something, or you need to be encouraged to go in a particular direction, and the right person perhaps can provide that encouragement. Cancer. We are now in the run-up to a full moon. This full moon is exact tomorrow, and so with this full moon, Cancer, I think that you are picking up on it. You're starting to feel that something is changing, that perhaps you're in a situation which is maybe reaching a crunch point, and it feels like it's a crunch point because recently there perhaps have been things that you haven't really understood. You were still trying to work them out, but things are starting to become clearer. I don't know. I suppose it's like in the old days before digital photography, people would they would put photographic paper in a dark room. Start as a white piece of paper in what did it go in, a developer or something, and then slowly you'd see the picture start to appear. And so perhaps that's the situation you're in. It's like being in a dark room and with a white piece of paper, but the picture is starting to emerge. And maybe, Cancer, that's how it's starting to feel. You're beginning to see something, and you hadn't seen it before, but the full moon is allowing you to see it. Okay, the full moon is not exact. You can't completely make it out, but I think you are starting to make it out. And it is going to be right in front of you, and it will be unambiguous. But then, of course, there's always a question: if you see the truth, are you actually going to act on the truth? I mean, that can be an issue. And I think at the moment, Cancer, you feel that where you're supposed to be, I mean, if you're honest with yourself, where you're supposed to be is, in some respects, where the action is. Where is the action in your life, or where should the action be? I think it's not a time when you should be keeping a low profile, even if you think you should be keeping a low profile. And this may relate to the sort of home-work balance, the public-private balance. Now, this balance, in a way, is a constant theme, or has been a constant theme in the Cancerian life for some time. And the reason for this is that the North Node is in Aries, that the South Node is in Libra. It's a fairly long-term thing, and it's the North Node doesn't move very fast. It can stay in a sign. It stays in a sign for a few years, and so you have this repeated theme. And with the moon moving into Aries, you're reminded of this theme, and you're reminded that ideally you should be where the action is, and you should be there as an active player, as someone who does make decisions, who isn't shy about expressing themselves. But there's still this great pull in the other direction. You are thinking about the past. The past is always there. Cancer as a sign is quite past orientated. You're not someone for forgetting, not really. And it's good to remember things. It's good to be grounded in the past, but you cannot be defined by the past. And with the North Node in Aries, you have to be ready to be taken notice of. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that anything is going to happen today. It's true that the moon is in Aries, but the moon doesn't actually make any real aspects to Aries, except it is making a conjunction. Sorry, the moon is not really making any aspects while it is in Aries, except it is making a conjunction to the North Node. And so perhaps Cancer, it's a day when you just need to be on standby. It may be that you can get away with not doing much, but you must be ready to suddenly up the pace of things. I think that is something you can do. I think that is something that you must be ready for. But maybe the real action happens tomorrow when we've got the full moon, and so perhaps there's no need to panic. Or when is that full moon, by the way? That full moon, which I will be covering today. So that full moon tomorrow is the full moon is in Europe. It's around lunchtime. So okay, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, that full moon is going to be. Is that right? Did I say lunchtime? It's going to be. Yeah, it's going to be sort of much later in the day if you're in Australia or New Zealand. So it depends, but just be ready for that full moon. And yeah, when I look at your sign tomorrow on Thursday, I'll be going into further detail about this full moon and how I think it might impact you. Leo, it seems that you are very well placed in a sense, because the sun is on speaker. So it's very nice having the sun on speaker. The sun is your ruler, and every year the sun moves on to speaker, and so it's a time when you can be prominent, within whatever limits you've set yourself, and you need to really think about what you can do, what your potential is, how you can be recognized. Yeah, it can happen. So really try to make the most of the speaker energy, because it is there, and I think that this might sort of be reflected in how you communicate. I think that you're able to communicate in a way that that grabs people's attention, and I think that people are going to listen to you, and I think they're going to respect you, and they'll be of a view that you have got something important to offer. But don't be complacent. Just because you feel you understand things doesn't mean you've understood everything. And we've got this build up to a full moon, and this full moon is exact tomorrow, and I think you can already feel this full moon. And I think, Leo, however clever you are, however knowledgeable you are, you have this slight feeling that there's perhaps something missing, that there's just something you haven't quite understood. And the full moon gives you the opportunity to understand it. And so in terms of how you communicate, yes, you can get respect, you can get people to listen to you, but don't communicate in such a way that you give the impression that you have all the answers. Because, Leo, I don't actually think that you do have all the answers, although I do believe that some of the answers, or indeed all of the answers, may actually be available if you're prepared to look for them. And if you want to look for the answers, you're going to have to be broad-minded. You're going to have to be open to all kinds of possibilities. And, just because something seems obvious doesn't mean that is the truth. And you must consider solutions and explanations that are unusual, that come from strange places. And with the moon currently moving through Aries, with this run up to the full moon, you perhaps have to really expand your horizons and move outside your comfort zone, and reach out perhaps to the other side of the world, or talk to people who seem to have a completely different background from you, because you need the answers. It doesn't matter where the answers come from. And sometimes the answers are not right in front of you. You actually have to go out of your way to find them. So that's the full moon, and I think that's the full moon, but we've got to build up to the full moon, and I think it is going to have an impact on you. And at the same time, Leo, the sun is on speaker, as I've already said, which is nice, but the sun is also making a square to Mars, and the sun has been square at Mars for the last few days. I think the sun square Mars was exact a day or two ago, but you're still feeling it. And the sun is not just square Mars, it's opposition Chiron, so that configuration is still floating around. And in fact, the full moon, tomorrow's full moon, may actually bring everything together, as I'll be discussing tomorrow, because I think in many respects it is quite a powerful full moon, and so you may in some respects be challenged by it, and there may actually be things that are starting to make you angry. Maybe at the moment, Leo, you're getting angry that things aren't quite as you expect. Leo is a fixed sign. There are things you'd like things to be done in a particular way, and it's starting to become clear that things are not quite as you expected. Maybe people are not behaving as expected, or it could be, Leo, that the truth is starting to annoy you. Maybe you're starting to see the truth of the matter. I don't know what that matter is. You've got to think about it yourself. But the truth of the matter, the truth of an important matter, is starting to become clear. And you need to accept the truth, whatever it is. I mean, it may not be a bad truth. It just may be something quite fortunate. It might be a new opportunity. But whatever it is, you don't seem to be entirely comfortable with it. And I think, therefore, it's important that you have a high degree of tolerance to what you hear other people say. And, don't assume you've got all the answers. You've got a lot of the answers, but there are some answers that you haven't got. And if you want these answers, you're going to have to perhaps go out of your way to find them. And don't be afraid of the truth. Virgo, you are feeling quite self-protective, I think. You do want to look after yourself, and you're aware that things are changing, that in some respects things are getting complicated. I mean, I don't think that you should be worried about things getting complicated, because in terms of these complications, I think you're well able to deal with them, and you can really understand them. And I think that part of a reason you can understand them is that, once you get going, you can be quite relentless. You can say, well, you have got to understand whatever needs to be understood, and you can really go for it. And at the same time, you're serious, but you're not overly serious. By that I mean, if you have a realization over the course of the day, or if you start to understand the way things are going, you're not going to panic. You're not going to say, oh wow, this is so heavy, what are we going to do about it? I think in many ways you will be able to take things in your stride in a quite a matter-of-fact way. But that is not the same as being casual or trivial or discounting things. There's no point in panicking. There's no point in taking things too seriously. Things are as they are. Or what do they like to say? It is what it is. I mean, that's a really common phrase. Everyone likes to use that same. It is what it is. I don't know when that phrase started to become common. It was just the last few years. Anyway, it is what it is. And I think that Virgos are very much able to take things as they are without panicking. And that does allow you to be realistic. And we all need realism, particularly now. We've got no planets in Earth signs unless you count Uranus and Pluto. So with no planets in Earth signs, some of us can be just a little bit sort of detached. Virgos can be concerned, I suppose, the fact there's no Earth. You like some stability, you like some security, but again, it is what it is. And Virgo, that it is what it is. And I think at the moment you're just quite good at dealing with confusion and ambiguity, just existing in it and just accepting it. And because of your acceptance of this ambiguity, that does give you freedom, and it gives you scope for maneuver. You're not going to get overly upset. You're going to be able to just carry on, and you'll be going to be able to carry on, work things out, understand the way things are unfolding. And this might actually relate to money, because we have a full moon tomorrow, and this full moon is across the finance axis of your chart. So from a financial perspective, I think that you are going to be very aware of the importance of money, but you're not going to get obsessed about money. You're not going to feel there's any cause for panic. I think that you'll be able to quietly get on with whatever you have to do, and you'll be able to do it in a calm, no-nonsense kind of way. So that looks good, and I think that your approach will get favourable attention. I think that your ability to be calm is going to be appreciated. You know, people need calmness. And in particular, they need someone who is able to deal with serious issues, but who is also able to keep their cool. And that's really what's needed. And I think that's something that today you can do. Libra. Today, Venus makes a trine to Neptune. And so with this Venus trine Neptune, I think that you're going to be perhaps a little more sensitive than usual. You're going to be able to sort of pick up on things which are not entirely clear and well defined, and they might have a sort of a spiritual nature. So if spirituality is important to you, then you'll be able to perhaps pick up on some of the energies, I don't know, high-level spiritual psychic energies floating around, flying around. You'll be able to pick up on it all. And I don't think that there's much that you will miss, though it can be somewhat overwhelming, Venus trine Neptune. You know, a trine is a kind of an easygoing aspect, and things can flow very quickly, very easily. There's nothing in their way, and it just happens. And so you may not always know what to make of it, and so it is possible that you need to have a certain sense of protection. I mean, you don't want to get completely overwhelmed by everything that you're picking up on, because I think that you could perhaps be something like a psychic magnet, or maybe it's a psychic sponge, but things are flying your way. And if things are flying your way, everything is flying your way. I mean, I suppose, like a magnet in a room full of iron filings, everything coming your way. But it could be useful, but you have got to perhaps understand your limitations. And I mean, I suppose it depends on you. You don't want to be too far away from the action. I mean, you have to understand that this is an opportunity, but if there's too much coming your way, you may be absolutely none the wiser and completely confused. So it might be a good idea at least to tell yourself that it is not a day when really you can make decisions or reach conclusions. Yeah, I mean, it's nice to have lots of information which in many respects is not going to be verbal information. It's going to be feelings. You know, information can be encoded in many ways, and words are not the only way they can be encoded. Now, I don't really understand that because I'm a Gemini, so words are very important to me, but I understand that other people have different ways of viewing information as it comes their way, and the verbal approach is not the only way. You can it could be emotions, images, pictures, colors. It depends. And so don't even necessarily try to sort it all out. Just be. And I suppose ideally, you just let it run through you. we're dealing with something non-material. And I suppose if you don't resist something, you could say, well, it just passes through and it doesn't cause any damage. If you try to resist and you try to process it, then you could get overwhelmed and you could grind to a standstill. So just try to be relaxed and don't feel you have to engage. And with this Venus trine Neptune, and I understand, we've also got Sun square Mars. Sun square Mars, there is hints of a conflict. It's not a day for conflict. It's not a day for battles or for really being desperate to assert your individuality. Just let it all happen, and that might be your strength. So in a way, Libra, I'm kind of saying, maybe you should pretend to be a Pisces. I know you're not a Pisces, obviously, but perhaps if you pretend to be a Pisces, going with the flow, going with the ocean and its vastness, that might be the best way of dealing with today's challenges. Now, tomorrow we have a full moon, Libra, and I think, Libra, you're starting to pick up on it, because we've got the moon moving into Aries. The moon is now starting to make an opposition to your sun in Libra. And so you're aware that something is coming to the boil. And it's happening. It's about to happen. And it may not affect you, maybe nothing to do with you, but wherever you are, it's starting to become clearer. Okay, you may not fully understand where it's going, but you just feel it, you just know it. And so, Libra, that might be, a very good reason to have a certain sort of detachment and, be open to what this full moon is going to be telling you. This full moon is likely to tell you something, because this full moon is across the main axis of your chart. And so... don't exaggerate, don't allow things to, go over the top. And, try not to come to conclusions. Now, one thing, sort of on a positive note, I should say, is that the sun is, of course, in Libra, but the sun is on Speaker. So sun conjunct this fixed star Speaker in Libra, I think is very much going to help you. It's going to help you in terms of getting a sense of what you can do. Librans can sometimes try to be too reasonable. They can try too hard to, I suppose, adapt. But you don't have to try too hard. And I think you do need perhaps to have a sense of who you are and what you can achieve and what your particular destiny is. And the sun conjunct Speaker can be about preferment and honor. And look at your own life and look at what you're trying to do, and perhaps think about where you deserve to be honored, where you deserve to be recognized as someone who is exceptional. Because there's got to be somewhere, some place, there is somewhere, some opportunity to get that kind of recognition with the Sun conjunct Libra. With the Sun conjunct Speaker. I'm not saying you're going to definitely be able to take advantage of the opportunity, but see what's happening, see what's available, and in general, Sun conjunct Speaker, I think does give you sort of heightened respect, and people are prepared to respect you if you allow them to. Scorpio, you're still feeling the Sun square Mars. I mean, the Sun is square Mars. Sun is squaring your ruler, because Mars rules Scorpio, and that might give you a lingering sense of agitation. But I don't think you're going to be as agitated as you were yesterday. I think it's starting to pass to some extent. But if you look at Chiron and Mars and the Sun, we do notice that the Mars is pretty close now to the Sun-Chiron midpoint. So the Sun-Chiron midpoint, today Mars is actually exactly on the Sun-Chiron midpoint. And I think you may feel that. And the Sun-Chiron midpoint is the principle of how you are different, and also how perhaps you may want to have a role in making things better. Maybe making things better. It could be making things better for yourself, but it could be making things better for the community or particular people in your community. And so your sign Scorpio there is a compassionate heart to the sign Scorpio, and I think your compassion is actually finely tuned today with Mars on the Sun-Chiron midpoint. And we always think with Chiron of the wounded healer, and I suppose today you may be very aware of your own wounds with Mars on the Sun-Chiron midpoint. Remember, it's Mars is still square the Sun, Mars is still square the Chiron, square Chiron. You could say, Scorpio, that through your own experiences, you may be in a position to help other people, and the help you offer is going to, in a way, be very unique. And sometimes when you go out of your way to help someone, you get criticism. Why are you doing that? You've got better things to do. But Scorpio needn't be a selfish sign. I don't think Scorpio. Well, I suppose Scorpios can be selfish. Everyone can be selfish, but there is a particular selflessness to Scorpio, because Scorpios, I suppose, they understand the mysteries of life and death, don't they? And they understand that everything is temporary, and you have to do what you can in this short life. I mean, that can be how Scorpios operate. And so it could be quite intense, this Sun square Mars, Mars square Chiron. But I don't think it need be too stressful. I think it's just about you understanding, what you have to do, and you have to do it in your own way. And the concept of healing is going to perhaps be important over the next day or two. The moon is in Aries. It's moving to a conjunction of Chiron. We've got that full moon coming up tomorrow. Now that full moon, is going to hit Chiron. It's going to hit Mars, and so this Mars on the Sun Chiron midpoint. It's part of the same movement, which kind of culminates maybe in that full moon that we've got tomorrow. And so Scorpio, I would have said it might actually be a very serious time for you. A time where you are asking yourself deep questions, and I think that on an emotional level, you are certainly going to have powerful feelings. And at the same time, in terms of relationships, I think you have to be aware of other people's powerful feelings. There is a trine aspect at the moment between Venus and Neptune, and that Venus-Neptune trine perhaps has an impact on relationships, and perhaps some of the people you deal with, you have to work with over the course of the day, you may realize actually that they're very sensitive and they are picking up on things. So I know that many Scorpios feel that they've got to keep things secret, that they don't want people to know. But with Venus trine Neptune, don't assume that people don't know. don't assume that you're able to hide your thoughts and feelings. Okay, it's not like that people are going to get a hard copy of a transcript. They're not going to get a transcript of your thoughts in a verbal sense. It's not like that. But they're going to feel what you're thinking. They're going to be able to feel what you're feeling. They're going to get an impression. And so don't try too hard to hide your thoughts and feelings. Okay, some things have to be kept secret if it's particular facts, but in certain situations it might be a good idea to just give something away. Tell someone something. Not your darkest, deepest secrets, but just something. It would just help explain things. It would help move things along, perhaps. So Scorpio, that's a broad picture. I do think that it's difficult today to look at things in isolation and to say that today is just a discrete entity, because it's not. It's because today runs into tomorrow. I mean, that's obvious, but when I say today runs into tomorrow, we do have a build-up to the full moon. You can start to feel the full moon today, and the fact that this full moon has an impact on Mars, because Mars is aspecting his full moon, and as you go into tomorrow, that full moon, you'll start to feel that full moon even more. And so, what I talk about tomorrow is going to really be a continuation of what I'm talking about now. Sagittarius. Sagittarius, you do feel that you have an individual way of looking at things, and you have an individual interpretation. And your individual interpretation may not be to everyone's liking, but that doesn't mean that it's not valid. And you may have a sense of what can and cannot be done, which other people might disagree with. It may be that you're quite cautious in some areas. You feel that it's just not possible to take particular actions, and other people might disagree with you. Or it may be the other way around. You may feel that something needs to be done, it can be done, no problem, and other people will be concerned. They say, do you know what you're doing? So there is a difference there, and you have a particular interpretation of what is possible given the system in which you live, whatever system that might whatever system that might be. And I suppose you need to reflect a little bit on your ideas about what's possible and what's not possible. It may be that you've got some things wrong. It may be you're being too cautious. It may be that you're being too adventurous. It kind of depends on the situation. But whatever happens, Sagittarius, it's very important that you are independent. Especially now with the moon in Aries, the moon making a conjunction, indeed the moon making a conjunction to the North Node in Aries. And this should be encouraging you to really start to think about what your unique contribution is. And it is about you being unique. It's certainly not a time for following the crowd. I mean, in the Sagittarian world, it's probably never a good time to follow the crowd. But now it really is not a good time. You have to decide, what matters to you, what is special to you, and give it everything you've got. Though, with this full moon, you are starting to understand the resistance. You understand that not everyone is supportive, and some people may be applying pressure on you to conform. And it might seem easier to conform in the short term, people give you less aggravation. But then if you're a Sagittarius that's being forced to conform, then, well, things can go wrong. You can explode, and we don't want that to happen. So Sagittarius, I think it's really does matter that you're able to think about what matters to you. You don't have to be unreasonable in terms of other people just for the sake of it. There's no point in just being rebellious because you just want to show that you're an individual. You just have to sort of quietly and calmly do the right thing. And the right thing in most cases is, I suppose, following your heart and also following your inspiration, because you're a Sagittarius. Inspiration does really matter, and if you feel inspired, you don't want that inspiration to be weakened by outside pressure. Capricorn, you do seem to feel that you want to hold firm. You don't really want to be part of anything. I don't think you're a team player at the moment. And you have your own ideas, and you feel that you want to keep these ideas to yourself. I mean, why not? What is the point? If you start to engage with other people, if you start to be out there getting lots of attention, what's the point? Are you going to actually achieve anything? And in many respects, the answer is you're not. And it may be, Capricorn, that the best thing to do at the moment is just to do things your way. And at the first instance, you might just feel, well, there's no point in discussing it. Absolutely no point, because people aren't going to be interested. Well, I think you might be wrong on that score, because Capricorn, your verbal skills at the moment are actually very good. You're able to explain yourself, and you're able to explain what's important to you. And if you've got an idea, you'll be able to talk about it. And if you're involved in any kind of project, then you'll be able to tell people about this project, and you'll be able to tell people about how great it is. And in the process, you may be able to tell people how great you are. Now, this is something you perhaps won't want to do. Your natural inclination will be just to keep quiet and just do your own thing. But it's not really necessary. Give people an opportunity to hear what you've got to say, hear your ideas, because I think in many cases they're going to be impressed. So don't be too shy, but nonetheless, everything has to happen your way. It's not a day, I don't think, for meeting people halfway. It's your way or nothing. And I think we've got this build up to this full moon, and I think this full moon is emphasizing this even more. I think with the full moon is reminding you of the difference between yourself and others. And it's also reminding you that if you try to do things in public, it might spoil everything. I mean, I suppose that is always a creative issue, isn't it? As soon as someone tries to address the public, tries to change things to suit public taste, very often things get watered down. And I suppose it's like, what is the definition of celebrity? And probably 90% of celebrities are celebrities, they've got to be extroverts perhaps, but the essence of perhaps being a celebrity is actually having the ability to conform. Because society wants celebrities who are on its wavelength. If someone is a real individual, is not prepared to conform, then in most cases they don't become a celebrity. And so perhaps that's, I mean, I know that I'm sure you're not really interested in being a celebrity. I don't know why I'm saying that, but I'm just saying that if you try too hard to conform, if you do things other people's way, then you're losing what makes you special. But I think you knew that anyway, so I'm probably stating the obvious there. So, the general message is, do, stick to your guns, but at the same time, don't write people off, because your ability to communicate in an effective and talented kind of way, in a way that really shows off who you are and how special you are, your ability to communicate in this way is extremely good. And I think in many cases people are going to listen to you. Aquarius, there is a full moon coming up. Okay, the full moon is not until tomorrow, but to an extent you might be feeling it, and this full moon may make you question some of your fundamental ideas, and there may be a certain tendency to take things too far and to sort of over-dramatize. And what really does matter at the moment is just making sure that you've got your facts right. That's your first priority. And today, we've got full moon tomorrow, but today, in the build up to the full moon, the full moon is about the truth. It's about showing you the truth, and you're starting to pick up on the full moon. And it's just important that you do get your facts right. And some of your facts, I suspect, are not entirely right. You've got a few things mixed up, and perhaps you've maybe just been a little bit too ambitious, and you've taken a set of ideas without really thinking them through. And when you actually deconstruct your ideas, you deconstruct what you believe in, it'll be clear that you've made some assumptions. So if today you do find that you've got strong beliefs about anything, it may be about something quite short term. You believe that something has to be done next week. You believe a particular action must be done. If you're in that kind of state of mind, then it's a chance to ask questions of yourself, I think, not necessarily of other people. To ask questions of yourself and to look at things again, and to be independent-minded about it, not to worry what other people are saying. You're an Aquarius, you're able to think independently, and so just look at things again. And I think when you start to look at things again, you'll start to see things in a different light, and I think that would be good preparation for tomorrow's full moon. When the full moon is exact, then things really do become clear, and you'll then perhaps be in a position where you're able to sort of revise some of your plans. Now, on a different note, Aquarius, I do think that your abilities are very much on offer. You have a clear sense of what you can do, and I think other people have a clear sense of it too. I think if you've got particular talents, those talents are going to be really available to you, and I think that you'll be able to demonstrate them without necessarily having to talk about them. I mean, I think you are actually a very effective communicator today, but it's not necessary to go out of your way to communicate. You can just you can communicate by just acting. Not acting. That's the wrong word. It's not acting at all. You can communicate by being just genuine. Actually, genuinely doing what you enjoy and what makes you feel comfortable, and people are just going to notice, and they're going to appreciate whatever it is that you're doing. So in terms of your abilities, it's very important that you're not shy, and you don't have to. But at the same time, I'm not telling you to be a wild extrovert. You just have to be as down to earth as is possible. I mean, okay, I understand it's difficult to be down to earth today for all of us, because there aren't any planets in earth signs unless you count Uranus and Pluto. So try your hardest under those circumstances, although it could be that because there are no planets in earth signs, it means that there's less constraint on you. You're perhaps not so concerned about things making immediate sense or things being immediately practical. You can perhaps just be yourself, be your creative self, in quite a sort of a free-flowing way. And I think you're going to be helped by the fact that Venus is trine Neptune. So, Venus is moving through Scorpio. Venus is actually really coming to the end of Scorpio. Venus is actually about to move into Sagittarius. But with Venus moving through Neptune, with Venus moving through Scorpio trine Neptune, it's a time when your abilities are actually on show. People can see them, and it's not about making an effort to push them. It's not about you making an effort to put them on show. They just are on show. People can see who you are. People can see what you can do, and that is, it's a good opportunity to get favourable attention. And in a way, the less you try, the less self-conscious you are, the better, and the easier it's going to be to make an impact. Pisces, we have a trine aspect between Venus and Neptune, and Venus is in Scorpio. Neptune is, of course, in Pisces, and I think that this Venus-Neptune trine, I think, is kind of a bit otherworldly, in fact. It reminds you that there are things going on outside your immediate senses, your physical senses, what you can see and what you can hear, but there are things going on elsewhere that you understand it, and you probably can't verbalize it, but you still get it on an emotional level, and you have a sense, I think, that there's something out there, of a spiritual or a sort of supernatural level, on a spiritual supernatural level, and you're really starting to pick up on it, and perhaps even be able to express it in some way. And I don't think you're too bothered by the fact you can't understand it. It's just there, and I think that might actually be quite reassuring. And so it may be a day when you can just sort of let go and not worry about the material world. At least that might be a temptation, though the material world may need a little bit of attention over the next couple of days, because we've got this full moon tomorrow, and this full moon is across the finance axis of your chart. Moon is moving into Aries. The moon, Aries, is the sign that follows Pisces, and so the sign following is a sign relating to resources. So Moon in Aries is about your resources. What are those resources? And you do have a sense of of what you have and of what you would like to have. And with this full moon, you have perhaps start to feel that something's missing on a material level, and it may not be something so important, but you still feel it would be nice if you could resolve the issue. What is it? What is it that you want? And of course, it may not be money. It may be a thing. It may be just a thing that you want, and you decide that you want it. And this thing, it's probably the kind of thing you can touch, because there are no Earth planets in Earth signs, at least no personal or social planets in Earth signs. Yeah, sure, transpersonal planets, Uranus and Pluto, but I kind of don't count those in terms of doing an elemental balance. And so you feel perhaps there's something you need, and you might feel you need to get it today or tomorrow. So if you do have that feeling, you perhaps have to work out what is it all about. Is it because you really need something? Or is it just some kind of compensation? It doesn't actually mean very much in the grand scheme of things, but you just want it, and you just keep wanting it, and you want it, and you want it, and you're going to have to get hold of it. And to get hold of it, you may have to go out of your way, you may have to spend some money, but is it worth it? Maybe you need to just get a deeper understanding of what this full moon means to you. And this full moon, and I'll be talking more about the full moon tomorrow, but very briefly, I think the full moon may be about your relationship to the material world and to things like money, and how you relate to financial complications. I mean, when I say financial complications, I don't mean to say that you're going to be in a situation where you have to deal with financial complications. It's just that you understand that money can be complicated. And I think that's something that the full moon is going to bring to light. But I don't want to talk any more about the full moon, because I will be talking a lot more about it tomorrow, when the full moon is exact. And so as far as today is concerned, perhaps the best thing to do is just to concentrate on the fact that Venus is trine Neptune. Just enjoy the atmosphere, and perhaps just focus on your spirituality, and just becoming aware that you are not alone, that there's something else out there of a spiritual or supernatural nature. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And I now want to look at today from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I ask the question, what is Wednesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 26, which is the taming power of the great. So this hexagram suggests that, we've got a lot of power. There are a lot of things we think we can do, but maybe now is not the right time. Or perhaps we have to look at the power we have in a different way. So, think about what you can do, what you're capable of doing. And I suppose we have to remember that from a heliocentric perspective, remember heliocentric and not a geocentric perspective, there is a conjunction between Mars and Jupiter. And this heliocentric Mars-Jupiter conjunction is very powerful. And perhaps we're all starting to pick up on it. And so we do have a sense of, yes, what we can do. But just because we can do something doesn't actually mean that we should do it. And the taming power of the great is perhaps looking at how we should perhaps be constraining ourselves. And, one way of constraining ourselves is to think about who we are. Where do we come from? Where is our past? And there may be things from the past which are disciplining us, focusing us. We might think, we're part of a new generation, okay? new generation. At least I'm a newer generation from my parents' generation, even though I'm 62 years old, so not really a new generation anymore. But still, there are messages from the past, lessons from the past, which we perhaps need to take into account. We might think that we have broken free from the past, but the past is with us. We are the past. And we have to allow the past perhaps to constrain us and limit us. And, I suppose from a psychological perspective, in terms of our parents, even if our parents are long dead, we still have images of our parents in our heads. Or even, parents can almost like become sub-personalities. And indeed, we might become our parents at some level. And that is all about the kind of constraints that we have to work under. So, just because we've got a lot of control, just because we've got a lot of power, doesn't mean we need to use this power. And so if there's something that we're really trying to move towards, we're really desperate to make it happen, I think in a natural sense we're going to find that we are held back, that things don't move as quickly as expected. Now, there is some controversy about where this constraint comes from. Now, using the Wilhelm translation of the I Ching, it seems that the constraint is something which is, it's quite positive. It's not, there's no conflict. There are people we respect who just tell us to hold back, and we do hold back, and we do the right thing. But Greg Winkup, in his translation of the I Ching, he has a different view. He actually sees this as a real conflict, that we may get overwhelmed, and perhaps the problem is we're taking things too quickly. So, I suppose it's like walking down a steep hill or down a mountain. Our legs start going faster than our body, and we fall over. So that's how Greg Winkup sees the transition, because there is a moving line. The second line from the bottom moves. So I suppose that's, if we try and bring those together, perhaps we could say, yes, there is restraint. There is something holding us back. But we might nonetheless plough on. And if we were to plough on, we would lose control. We'd be too strong for ourselves, and we could then be quite self-destructive. Yeah, it's like our legs going too fast. Our legs going at 10 miles an hour, the rest of us going at 2 miles an hour, and we just trip up. And that's not going to work, is it? Now, with the second line moving, that does mean that we move to a separate hexagram, a new hexagram, and the hexagram it moves to is hexagram number 22, which is grace. So grace is telling us to just calm down. We are able to restrain ourselves, hopefully, and it's not about our actions. It's about how we comport ourselves, how we behave. And we shouldn't be trying to achieve great things. It's more about getting people's respect. With grace, there is a suggestion that we are quite sort of attractive, that if we make the effort, people will respond well to us. And by being graceful, and perhaps by literally focusing on what we wear and coming over in a way that doesn't cause upset. It's not a time for delivering messages with T-shirts with violent political slogans, for example. That it's not that kind of time. We're trying to be harmonious. We're not trying to offend anyone. We're not trying to make points. We're just trying to fit in. Now, that might seem rather demeaning, but we have to remember that it is about today, and it's about how to make the most of today's opportunities. And so overall it's just about pausing. Yeah, we might have the power to move on, but it's not the right time to use that power, and we just have to just fit in. And I think that's the best way of having an effective day. And also, it's going to help us in the end achieve our agenda, whatever that agenda might be. But we just have to be patient. And of course, we shouldn't forget that we've got a full moon coming up tomorrow. And it's full moon. It's quite a difficult full moon. So that's another good reason why we just have to be calm and not do anything to cause any upset. So that's the I Ching. And now I just want to look at some events and anniversaries that took place on October the 16th. I don't have any sort of one sort of overriding theme. So let's start with the nuclear explosion that took place 60 years ago. So this was Project 596. So Project 596 was China's is when China became a nuclear power. Now, you might notice in terms of this chart that I appear to have set it for Beijing. The reason I set it for Beijing was because I knew the chart happened at 3 p.m. Beijing time, so I set it for Beijing, and then I changed the coordinates so that it fitted the coordinates of the test site, which was at Lop Nur, which I think is in Western China. And so this was obviously an important event for the Chinese. I think they got a lot of Russian help, and as far as the bomb itself, I think it was not a plutonium bomb. It was a uranium bomb. I think it was a uranium implosion device. And it was 22, I think it was 22, let's get this right, 22 kilotons. So it was I suppose was it slightly larger than the Hiroshima bomb. And so as far as the chart itself for the explosion is concerned, it's kind of fitting that it happened. It happened in the sort of mid to early 60s. It had Uranus, Pluto. In fact, Kamala Harris has got this conjunction in her chart because this explosion happened 4 days before Kamala Harris was born. So there's Uranus. I suppose it's sort of opposition Chiron. It's not. I would not have said that this was a particularly dramatic event. I mean, okay, it was a dramatic event for China, but it wasn't a nuclear first, it wasn't like Hiroshima. It wasn't like the very first nuclear explosion. It was, China was just the fifth nuclear power. Neptune is on the midheaven square Mars. Now, you could say with Mars-Neptune that you have the idea of pollution. I suspect that the Chinese were not particularly concerned about environmental issues at the time of the explosion, and so maybe that is how the Mars-Neptune square is working. That might be one manifestation of it. And I suppose who it was really important for was, I suppose, the Chinese. And so here is the horoscope of China, October the 1st, 1949. I don't know whether that noon is actually correct, but looking at how the explosion impacted the Chinese horoscope, this is the People's Republic of China when it came into being. China had Saturn at 13 degrees 8 Virgo. So Uranus was on China's Saturn. So I suppose you could say Saturn is about its limitations, perhaps about having to perhaps be reliant on the Soviet Union. That's sort of part of its history. And then Uranus, and it was a uranium bomb, conjunct China's Saturn, seemed to facilitate the explosion somehow, and so that perhaps is how it worked. Mars also, look at Mars. Mars was at 18 Leo, so Mars was just past China's Pluto. So Mars on your Pluto would seem to fit a country becoming nuclear for the first time. So anyway, that's Project 596, and it is the 60th anniversary of China becoming a nuclear power. Now, China did have some influence in Europe, and there was one country in Europe which did have diplomatic relations with China for a long time. It broke off diplomatic relations with the Soviet Union because the Soviet Union perhaps was not communist enough, and it was, this country in Europe was, of course, Albania, and Albania was famous for its good relations with communist China. As I said, it broke off relations with the Soviet Union soon after Stalin died, and the man in charge of Albania, who I think his official title was the first secretary of the Party of Labour of Albania, was born on October the 16th, 1908. That means he's a Libra. So Librans can be dictators, and they can be very effective dictators. Librans seem to understand politics, and so here is there's Enver Hoxha. I think his name pronounced Enver Hoxha's sun in Libra, and so he had his sun in Libra, trine Pluto, and so the issue of power is quite important to him. He is also associated with being quite a brutal dictator. He was quite ruthless, and he did not tolerate any opposition at all, and I suppose I don't know. Did he do a good job? I think there is a view, but in the first few decades of his time as leader of Albania, there were improvements. There were economic improvements, and he very sensibly had a rule that Albania was not allowed to get into debt. So there were some advantages there. And of course we had Radio Tirana. So Radio Tirana, the capital of Albania, you would have these broadcasts from Albania. I remember in the early 80s, I went to a CND rally in London, and I went back, got home, and I turned on the radio and I listened to Radio Tirana, and sort of Radio Tirana was describing the CND rally that I'd just come back from, and the Radio Tirana was describing how the British police had been really brutal, how some demonstrators had apparently been shot. That's what Radio Tirana said, that the British police had shot a few demonstrators at the CND rally. So, you on Radio Tirana, it was a brief broadcast, but you found out some things. And there was, I do have a sort of sense of nostalgia about Albania. It's now fall of communism. I don't know, things have changed. But yeah, I think one can be nostalgic about Albania, but it was quite brutal, and dissent was not tolerated. And Enver Hoxha, he had a Mars-Saturn opposition, Mars at 3 degrees Libra opposition Saturn, and so this is perhaps someone who is associated with death. Although, you have to remember also with that Mars-Saturn opposition that during the Second World War he was leader of the communist resistance against the Nazis in Albania, and I suppose that experience of being a resistance leader was probably really difficult, and I suppose seeing Nazi atrocities in Albania must have had some influence on him. Before that, I think he'd just been a school teacher, and then he was plunged into the world of totalitarian powers, and atrocities, and I suppose he was perhaps shaped by what he saw during the Second World War with that Mars opposition Saturn. And October the 16th was also talking about death and Mars Saturn, was the beginning of the executions after the Nuremberg trials. So I believe that they started in the early morning. So the Nuremberg trials in 1946 was when these top Nazi war criminals were hanged, and this is the chart of the execution. The first person to be hanged was Joachim von Ribbentrop, and he died at around, because I've got for 1:29 a.m. approximately around that time he was hanged. And so this is a chart for when it started. I don't really want to go into that chart in great detail, but it's kind of interesting that it's happened with sort of 4 planets in Scorpio. I suppose you could see that Scorpio is, I suppose, something to do with justice and life and death, and that if you do something bad, you get executed, and that's what happens. So that's the Nuremberg trials. I don't see anything particularly dramatic about the chart of the first executions. And finally, it's the anniversary of Pope John Paul II becoming Pope. So that happened on August the 16th, 1978. So that would be 22. That would be 46 years ago. And here is the chart for the smoke. When they saw the smoke announcing that they'd elected a pope. October the 16th, 1978, 4:18 p.m. in the Vatican City. And what's kind of interesting about that chart is the South Node on the ascendant. I know that John Paul II is revered. I suppose he's revered for his role in supposedly the overthrow of communism, having a Polish pope, but South Node on the ascendant. I mean, he was quite a traditional pope, and I think now he's perhaps been criticised for sort of turning a blind eye to, for example, the sexual abuse that in the Catholic Church, not doing something about it. I suppose you could say it happened on his watch, and so perhaps that's one aspect of the South Node, of the South Node on the ascendant. So it's not all great, but as far as his chart is concerned, here is John Paul II's chart, and so he was a Taurus, born on May the 18th, 1920, and let's look at his chart compared with at the exact time that he became Pope, because there was quite a lot going on, which kind of confirms a traditional view of astrology. So we seem to have a time of birth for John Paul II, and John Paul II's midheaven was at 539 Leo. So he had Jupiter within a degree of his midheaven. And that's classic astrology. Jupiter on the midheaven, you get a job. I mean, in my experience with Jupiter on the midheaven, it very often coincides with either gaining a job or losing a job. I remember, when I was doing I did contract work for a cell phone company in the UK, doing horoscopes and horoscope text messages. And I got the job, or I got the contract, when Jupiter was on my midheaven, when crossed my midheaven, and 12 years later, I lost the job when Jupiter was on my midheaven. So in my experience, Jupiter is about gaining jobs and losing jobs. And in John Paul II's case, Jupiter on the midheaven, what more can you say? And, he's also got Neptune on the midheaven. I mean, Neptune on the midheaven for being a priest and for being a pope, that seems to be the perfect way to use Neptune on the midheaven. That is a very constructive way to use Neptune on the midheaven. Because Neptune is about spirituality, and it's about, can be about God. It's about religion. It's what we believe in. So Jupiter on his midheaven, then making a conjunction to Neptune. That's perfect traditional textbook astrology. Also, the Sun at the time of his becoming Pope was approaching his ascendant, but it was exactly conjunct his Mars. So Mars in Libra doesn't look great, but still, it's in its detriment. But didn't really seem to bother him. I mean, you could say that Mars was probably quite close to Speaker, relatively close to Speaker. I don't quite know where Speaker was at the time he was born. But I suppose he's got Mars rising. And I suppose also, with Mars rising, here is someone who is maybe quite ambitious and quite capable, I suppose, of asserting himself. And so I suppose maybe with the Sun conjunct Mars, it perhaps gave him the impetus to sort of propel himself. And I don't know what happened during the papal conclave, and Venus. There was actually a Sun-Venus semi-square, so that Venus was Sun-Venus semi-sextile, and that Venus was semi-sextile Mars, and somehow that seemed to help. Anyway, that's Pope John Paul II's chart, and 46 years ago today he was elected Pope, and that's all I've got to say for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be really grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thanks again for listening, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.